It's Thursday night and it's a little after 7 o'clock. We're Garnet and Old, no inside info, no contacts, no problem. I have a big story to tell about why we're starting a little late tonight, but we'll get to that a little bit later. We've been promoting this a lot today. As you know from the promotion, Ryan is on a cruise ship right now and probably drinking way too much, eating too much, getting a lot of sunburn. So Doug, my buddy Doug here, who everybody knows, has offered to graciously be the co-host tonight. And what a perfect night for that, too, because so much has gone on in terms of the litigation or whatever you want to call it in the last few days or so. Doug, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thanks. I'm doing great. Yeah, we planned this about a week ago and it was well timed. We were hoping we might have something new to share. And sure enough, we've got some really big stuff to share. So I can't wait to get into it with you. And we're not just going to talk about litigation for those people who are getting tired of that conversation. We've got a couple other things going on with Saban and ESPN GameDay, and got a full agenda for you tonight. I'm not going to be just the host to talk about legal stuff. We're going to talk about all kinds of booster events and the stadium renovation and things that are coming up for the coming year.
You must be excited about that because I'm sure the majority of what you get is related to legalese. So I'll give you a chance to just take that hat off for a moment. So that's good. So the reason why we're starting a little late tonight, I was attending a Seminole booster event here in North Florida, and got to meet a bunch of fellow Noles out at a local establishment that offers baked wings. So if you know what I'm getting at, that's the restaurant that does that. Actually, I've shout out some people here because they were asking about the podcast. So I got to meet a bunch of people tonight. Kyle, I got to meet Dan, Bob, Trevor, Ryan, Chad, Stephanie, Ralph. I mean, there was just people, person after person, and all wearing their Knoll gear tonight. And I actually have some tidbits actually from this. When we talk about no inside info, no contacts, we have a little bit of contacts tonight. So I have some information to give with that too. So what did you do today, Doug?
Well, I was planning on having a productive day, having lunch with some other attorneys, talking about getting some new cases in. And, TJ reached out to me last night about this new filing, and we're trying not to jump on and do podcasts every time. I'm flattered and we've had a good time. Of course, it's fun for me to get on and talk about it, but yeah, we're starting to refer to it as the car wash when I hop on and do 4 or 5 podcasts in a 48-hour period. So we're trying not to. That we legitimately are. And so when the motion was filed or the brief in opposition to the motion to seal the documents was filed, we didn't hop on and do a bunch of shows because that wasn't a big deal. And last night when this brief first came out, this motion to dismiss and delay or stay the case, when it first came out on a first reading real quickly through, I didn't really see anything too much that was involved. But then this morning I did want to come in and take a second look at it. I got to the office about an hour early so I could do some research and not eat up into my work time. And as I was starting to peel back the layers of this onion, I was like, my head was just exploding when I was realizing what it was that they were alleging in this motion to dismiss. And as I kept digging into it and started researching the bylaws and comparing that back to what was filed with the original ACC complaint, and started looking back into the Florida statutes, because again, I'm not a Florida lawyer. I'm up here in Atlanta, Georgia. So I started peeling back and looking at some of the details. And one of the Twitter, commenters posted, this reality. These people, yes, they're high powered, and yes, they're in positions of power, and yes, they're given a lot of trust, but they're just regular people, and they might not know that Florida State Statute 1001.73 has a one sentence line that says, hey, if the state of Florida wants to, or if FSU wants to enter into a contract, then only the Board of Trustees has the authority to sign off on those contracts. So just something as small as that and as little as that really made me realize, no, the Florida State legal team has some teeth on this motion to dismiss. And frankly, we'll get into some of the more details here in a bit, but I will not be surprised if the North Carolina Mecklenburg judge punts this and says, yeah, we are going to put this on the back burner. There's some serious problems with North Carolina rushing out and trying to be first to file and screwing some things up along the way.
How do we not all know the verbiage in the laws? We should all know this stuff, but there's no reason to bury the lead. We're not going to do that here. We're not going to make people hang out forever and ever. We're going to talk about the litigation first.
Okay.
Because that's what everybody, and I know I didn't list that the same way, but I think that's what everybody really wants to get into. So there's no sense to, to wait. We did send out in the tweets that went out and the Facebook posts that went out, there was some homework people were supposed to read before they came into this show tonight. And if you didn't, that's okay, because Doug's going to walk us all through it. But if you do have any comments, jump in the comment section, ask if you want something to be, front and center for Doug to answer. Super chat it if you would like. But we're going to try to get to as many comments as we can tonight. So motion to dismiss. Let's start there, Doug. And I know, you're great at this. Just a brief encapsulation. What does that mean?
Well, look, it's always fun if you can win a football game at the coin toss. And that's essentially what is happening. This is early pleadings. This is very early in the case. As we've reported a couple times, the answers to both complaints, the defendant has to file their formal response on February 16th. So we've had a lot of stuff happening before the answers are even due. And one of them, I expect the ACC to file something similar if they can come up with some cogent arguments. I expect the ACC to file something similar in the Florida case. But this is a motion to dismiss. This is saying, look, even if you take everything the other side said at face value, which is all we can do pre-discovery, they still fail to state a claim upon which this court has the right to issue an opinion. So here what they're saying is that the motion to dismiss happens in every case. 99.9999999% of the time they're denied. But here the Florida State team has laid out 4 reasons why they believe that this is an improper suit to be filed in North Carolina. The first thing that they've pointed out is that the ACC was premature in filing suit before an actual or justiciable controversy arose. So we talked about this in the last video. The ACC found out about the Board of Trustees meeting. They ran out and they filed their lawsuit asking for a declaratory judgment. Now, on the one hand, I think this is a weak argument from Florida State, because a declaratory judgment is seeking an opinion from the court before a breach of contract has happened. So that part of it is not unusual. That part of it is not improper. What happens is there are 2 issues with the ACC rushing out there trying to be quick. That relates to their 4th allegation, which is that the FSU board did not, or no, I'm sorry, this is the second issue. Yeah. So the first and second issue piggyback each other. The second issue was that the ACC failed to obtain a vote from 2/3 of its members as required by the Constitution to initiate the lawsuit. So initially, when this came out in the initial pleadings and the initial amended complaint from Florida State, and when this came out in the initial filing last night, I really didn't put too much stock in it, because how could the ACC possibly overlook something so major? If they felt that this really required votes of the members and boards, they would have done it. They've got some reason or some argument why they shouldn't. Apologize, dogs are going to lose their mind over Chinese food being delivered.
That's okay.
You ask the next question.
Hold on a second. Yeah. So let me fix this here real quick. Ryan's joining from the cruise ship, which is fantastic, by the way. We live in a great time. And Ryan is drinking as well. Beautiful. So going back, Chattanooga, which I have a bottle of here in the back as well. The ACC basically tries to get a nanny boo boo in place. We got to the finish line before you did, and got this thing submitted. But what you're saying is that that's not out of the realm of weirdness, because That's kind of what a declaratory judgment is all about, right? So that in and of itself, being first to the plate, isn't necessarily a bad thing. They may have been looking for a venue kind of what's the word I'm
Advantage.
looking
They
for?
wanted to get an
Advantage,
advantage.
maybe with that too. But what you're saying is the other thing doesn't really. Oh boy, this show is going to go off the rails
Vince,
pretty quickly.
I'm gonna hop off. I just wanted to say hello. Hey, send the cheese all the damn time.
I have
No
some
inside
information
info, no
about.
No,
contact.
I
no
have some
problem.
inside information.
Oh wait, we have information about that coming up. So stay tuned, everybody. Enjoy,
You guys
Ryan.
be well.
Take care, Ryan.
Sunblock, brother. Anyway, go ahead.
So the first part is they did not get the vote. And at first I was thinking, well, maybe, you know, that's a gray area. But no, I looked it up and I included it in my tweets today. Any litigation, any material litigation, they call it. Now, the ACC can settle a claim that's already in place just through the commissioner. You don't need necessarily a 2/3 vote, which is maybe going to be something interesting that applies to this case in a couple weeks. But to initiate litigation, to initiate material litigation, you require 2/3 votes of the members. What is more material in litigation than suing one of your own members?
Right.
Suing one of your own members at the risk of your conference collapsing on itself. So this is very clearly material litigation.
Yeah. So they basically, in their rush to nanny nanny boo boo, they neglected something that was, you know, specifically spelled out in the bylaws that had to take place before they could take that action. Now, I know you're speculating on this part, but in your speculation, from what you've seen leading up to this, do you think that is just negligence, or they were willing to take that risk knowing they had to do that?
I am speculating 100%.
Yes, of course.
But I also believe the most likely and reasonable story is usually the accurate one. We see that all the time in our criminal practice and with clients. It is very reasonable to believe that the higher ups in the ACC knew that being first was going to provide a tactical advantage, and being first was actually going to be one of their strongest arguments in favor of a positive resolution for them. What they counted on, I believe, was FSU not recognizing this, not seeing it.
Right.
It is possible. There are bad attorneys out there that would miss things like this. So I think that they realized the risk of getting nothing outweighed the necessity of filing first in North Carolina in the hopes that they could get a North Carolina judge to evaluate this claim. And we still are relying on the answer that's going to come. The North Carolina or ACC is going to file an answer. So maybe they come out with some new information and pertinent information as to why they have an argument around this clause. And two, we still are banking on the judge to be rational and make a legally reasonable decision. Judges are human. Judges have biases. It is possible for a judge to reach a wrong conclusion. It does happen. That's what appellate courts are for. And it's right. And there are appellate courts that reach wrong decisions. Now, again, it comes down to, I have faith in the system. I trust in the system. I think ultimately the right results happen the vast majority of the time. But just because we're making these legal arguments and just because we're presuming what's in these pleadings is accurate, that doesn't mean that the case ultimately goes our way. And that's why at the end of the day, cases settle. And this is probably, as strong as this is looking today,
Right.
on February 8th, this is still very likely to settle at some point.
So yeah, water that down a little bit. Presuming the ACC legal team knew that what they were doing was shaky, they were willing to do it, hoping that FSU wouldn't call them on it,
Mm-hmm.
that they wouldn't be competent enough to figure it out. But even so, even if they did figure it out, it was worth the risk to do that. So
Because the alternative is playing defense in Florida, and they are starting off, with a 2-strike count already if that's the best approach that they have.
got it. All right. So back to the motion to dismiss and the couple points, and I read through the threads. I did my homework today.
Yay.
Hopefully the rest of the people here have done the homework, and if not,
Apparently 74,000 other people did their homework.
Have done their homework tonight.
That got some traction today.
That's fantastic. And comedy gold, by the way, some of the stuff you wrote in there. So you're able to sprinkle in the humor of it all as well. Talk to us about a little bit more about the sovereignty part of it.
So this
Because
was
I think
one
people
that,
get confused about that.
Yeah. I admitted it last night. I posted, when I was going through and posting some of the snippets from the document and putting it out there, I said, I don't know about sovereign immunity. I haven't researched this. This isn't something that's, commonly used in my practice. So that was one of the reasons why I went to work an hour early this morning to dig into that. And that's really where
volunteer hours,
my jaw hit the floor. Yeah. It's marketing. This is marketing hours. The way the sovereign immunity statute works in Florida is the state of Florida cannot be sued. And that's not uncommon. Most states have something along those lines. If a police officer is in the line of duty, if a medical officer that's working for the state at Shands does something wrong, the state is trying to protect its own interest and doesn't want to be subject to any tort suit, to any other, type of frivolous lawsuit. They cap tort damages at $200,000 in the occasion that you can pierce the sovereign immunity. But when it comes to civil cases involving contracts, one of the exceptions that the courts have carved out is, look, we have to have the ability for the state to engage in private contracts. The state can't do everything. There's an overlap of where state and private entities work together. And so we have to be in a position where the state can, in fact, be sued related to contracts. But there's two important points that are relating to this case here. The first of which is it must be a written and valid contract. Well, that might be a question for us to address. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And the second part is there must be an actual breach of the contract. The only thing that you can sue the state for is an actual breach of a written contract. Well, that conflicts with a declaratory judgment action, because what you're doing is you're going to the court asking for an opinion about an issue before the breach occurred.
Yeah.
No breach occurred on December 22nd before the Board of Trustees met. So in this race to run out and make sure that they were first, they were in fact premature, asking for an issue to be litigated against an agency of the state of Florida when no such violation or breach had occurred. That is why I think all of a sudden, bam, there's a fatal error in the ACC strategy. And I absolutely believe the North Carolina judge is going to say, my hands are tied. I have no choice but to punt this. Now, there's three possible scenarios, three possible answers. Again, let's save that for the conclusion later on.
Yeah, for sure.
So the failure to have a contract in the breach of the contract. The other issue in the sovereign immunity is, was there a contract? That is now center stage. That is now an issue. As we talked about, the statute, the language says only the Board of Trustees can enter into a contract. And one poster, unfortunately, my phone is resetting. I wanted to give him credit, but I can't take a picture of can't look at my pictures. I'll shout him out in the comments later on. But he said, allegedly, that he has been researching this since December, and he's gone through every Board of Trustees minute back to 2013, and there was no time ever where the Board of Trustees had a vote to give the president the authority to approve the grant of rights on behalf of the Board of Trustees. If that is true, if that plays out in discovery, then the president did not have the authority to sign the grant of rights, which invalidates any contractual obligation to the grant of rights to begin with.
That's unbelievable, first of all. That's unbelievable, and it just speaks more to just the general incompetence that was going on at the time. To not understand the laws of the states of the institutions that you have members in, or the states that the members are in. And I saw some stuff on, and social media is a tricky place, man. It's a tricky place. But I started
Good
seeing
and
things,
bad, positive and negative.
right, for sure. I started seeing some things about, like, does the fact that Florida State accepted financial gain as part of this contract, does that matter over these years? Does that matter in terms of a contract being deemed to be signed?
So there's two principles that can apply in certain situations here. One of them is the idea of an implied contract. If you engage in certain activity based on something that you are supposed to do, there can be an implied contract. Implied contracts do not survive the sovereign immunity question. The sovereign immunity question specifically states, yes, we're going to let you sue the state, but we're only going to let you sue the state based on a written contract. The example in the case that I cited in my tweets that I actually cut and pasted that from, there was a municipality that had engaged with a private contractor to do some road work, to do some road repairs. The contractor completed and fulfilled the written contract requirements. And in the process of doing construction, which happens all the time, you find out, oh, we got to do this too, and we got to do that too, and we got to do a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. Well, there were cost overruns. That happens. They tried to submit a bill to the municipality for these cost overruns that were jobs outside the contract. And the municipality said, no. We contracted you to do A, you voluntarily did B, C, and D. And that's reprehensible. And that's against public policy. That's gross. You can see why the contractor would be like, but I thought we had an agreement. I thought we had a deal. They took that to court. They sued, and the court said, you have sovereign immunity. You can pierce sovereign immunity, but only based on the four corners of the contract. We're not going to imply that there was additional work. So that specific issue has already been addressed. There is no implied contract protection for sovereign immunity. The second issue is the idea of estoppel. Sometimes if you are stopped, and came up in our other videos before, you're stopped from saying you're not going to do something if you've already been compensated. Well, the thing that everybody is missing when they make that argument, and it's mostly Georgia Tech and North Carolina fans, if you allege that we got all these millions of dollars from all these years of the contract, we did our job. We did our duty. We performed on the field. You are compensating us for the work that we already did. What we're asking you now is, what are we going to do about 2024 to 2036? You haven't paid us yet. If we had accepted $112 million for this contract through 2036, then we would have estoppel. We would either have to give back the $112 million or perform our work through 2036. It doesn't apply in a situation where we've yet to be paid for the work that we've yet to do.
I got to tell you, one of the terms I love the most is the four corners of the contract. I mean, you cannot assume anything. And so, just like you mentioned about the example about the municipality and having a contractor doing these cost overruns, you better get something signed before you do additional work, because especially with a state institution of some kind, because the chances, you would hope people would do the right thing, but it doesn't mean they're going to.
Right.
So I love that, the four corners. I love that. So what else? So those are the main things about the motion to dismiss. And it seems to me, and now we're biased, there's one more.
No, I was going to say, let's talk about what is going to happen. What happens in North Carolina and what happens in Florida. So the judge, first off, the ACC is going to file a responsive pleading. I was actually surprised today that we didn't get an instruction or an order from the judge requesting a response in a shortened time frame. You usually have 10 days, 20 days to respond to motions, but answers are due 2016. We also have the layer of, we didn't hop on the video to talk about ESPN getting dragged into this. ESPN has a responsive brief due February 25th about whether or not to keep the contracts private. We can talk about that in the next segment. So there are deadlines coming up. I expected either today, maybe tomorrow, that the judge would come out and say, ACC, I know you usually have 20 days to respond to this motion, but I need you to respond by Monday because I'm going to issue a ruling by Wednesday, because the 16th is coming up real fast. So he's going to ruin everybody's Valentine's plans. He's going to decide, real quick. It is quite possible that North Carolina litigation could be done on Wednesday, or at least delayed. So the three options that the judge has after the ACC files its response is the judge can dismiss the case without prejudice. The judge can say, ACC, you screwed up. ACC, you need to go get the votes. Come back and refile after you've cured these deficiencies. That's the first possibility. The second possibility is a judge can dismiss with prejudice. This is the least likely of the options, because what the judge is saying there is, you had your chance. You screwed up so bad that I don't even want to see your face in this courthouse anymore. Go away and don't come back. And then the third possibility, which I think is probably 80% likely in this situation, is the stay. The judge could say, you know what, FSU, you made some great arguments. I'm not ready to dismiss this case yet because we haven't gotten into discovery, but you've shown me enough that I'm going to put this on the back burner and let it simmer while Florida State and the ACC hash this out in the Florida jurisdiction. That's what I think is the most likely result to come from this.
Well, and the reason for that, the reason why I think that's the most likely, is it because of the merits of the motion to dismiss, or do you think it's more of a home cooking kind of thing?
Both. I think that's, I generally believe, and maybe I'm the naive one, it happens a lot in our administrative court in the workers' compensation cases that we do. The judges don't like to draw hard lines. The judges try to reach compromises wherever possible. When you go to court, you either win or you lose. That's why a settlement is almost always preferable. So anytime a judge can keep themselves from having to say, you're right and you're wrong, judges like that. So this idea that they get to grant a stay and not make a final decision, especially without discovery taking place, that's very appealing to a judge who is already looking like this is going to be a problem. And look at the Tennessee NCAA litigation. The judge agreed that no harm was going to be done by leaving the NCAA restrictions in place on NIL, but he also put in there, I think you're going to lose. I haven't seen the whole case yet, but I'm just letting you know, NCAA, you're on thin ice.
Not looking good.
Yeah. Again, you may want to go ahead and settle if you're thinking about it. So the judges are human. Judges have to go home to their families. Judges read the newspapers. Judges get reelected. So anything that the judge can do, especially a North Carolina judge that's about to rule against the ACC, that has a way out that's less catastrophic than just telling the ACC to kick rocks, I think is very appealing and is probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't doubt that either. I mean, just from the standpoint of, like we've been saying over and over, like these are human beings that are, prone to making mistakes, no matter how intelligent they are. So, letting the thing kind of simmer may seem like the best plan of attack there. Also taking into account that, the judges live in the triangle, and as we saw today, the ACC decides that every conference championship game of every sport is going to happen in the state of North Carolina and nowhere else, because, there are no other schools in the ACC except for North Carolina schools.
That was absolute trash. Absolute trash.
People wonder why we want to get out. But anyway, so yeah, that date of February 16th is coming up quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when everybody has to have their responses in from what's been submitted, correct?
Right. So Florida State will file an answer in Mecklenburg County saying these allegations are not true, these issues are not correct, and this is why. And again, they're just as valid and just as detailed as the complaint, maybe even less. The only legal requirement for you to file in an answer is to say all of the information in paragraphs 1 through 287 are not true. So an answer doesn't have to be detailed. An answer is an acknowledgement that you know that this is a case that's going to be starting. You know that you're being sued for something. You've retained counsel and you're prepared to address these issues in a legal setting. That's all an answer does. Whether or not there's any details or not remains to be seen.
Is that the official term? I don't know. Is it called an answer?
It is. A complaint and an answer is due.
So that it makes me smile because it reminds me of one of my favorite movies of all time, My Cousin Vinny, where Joe Pesci just basically wakes up from a nap and says, everything that guy just said is bullshit.
Yep. That's exactly what an answer is.
That's the vocal answer. That's the verbal answer. One of my favorite scenes of all time. So they're expecting that, and
the ACC will likewise file their answer in
Florida,
Tallahassee. Yeah, I'll be curious if, based on this motion to dismiss, the ACC also files some kind of motion to dismiss in Leon County tomorrow, because that would make sense. That would be appropriate. That would be a counter move that I would be expecting from them.
Yeah. I think we're all kind of expecting that. I'm just surprised that they didn't jump the gun on that, like they tend to premature other things as well. So that's happening on the 16th. What you're saying is the judge in North Carolina may say, hey, because this answer is coming up, like the date of that is coming up, I need something from you about this motion to dismiss prior to that.
Correct.
Right. So you're right. I think any Valentine's Day plans that North Carolina legal team may have in play about sipping tea under the swaying pines, they may want to reschedule those because they have some work to do. Interesting. What else? So what else from your homework do you want to? Because I can tell you got some energy about this. What else do you want to sink your teeth into?
I'm trying to think what we were tweeting about earlier today and what we wanted to cover. This is one that it's going to be anticlimactic because I'm saying I don't know. One of the things that I've seen pushed repeatedly is this idea that sovereign immunity means Florida State cannot be sued in North Carolina. That's a great argument. That would be very useful if there was some support for it. I have not seen anything to suggest that somehow there's this magic wall along the borders of the state of Florida, that all the language and discussions we've had about sovereign immunity and how to get around sovereign immunity, I haven't seen anything yet that suggests the piercing of the sovereign immunity only occurs within the state of Florida. It seems to me if you can pierce sovereign immunity and sue in tort or sue in breach of contract, that you can do it in any other jurisdiction nationwide where those suits would be appropriate. Now, there is a legitimate argument that such a suit is not appropriate in North Carolina. We're talking about the connections. We're talking about where the business took place. We've talked about that in the first video. There's some allegation that the contract was signed electronically and transmitted to North Carolina. So if the signing of the contract illegally by the president took place in Tallahassee and was transmitted to North Carolina, and then that removes one of the Jenga pegs. I mean, North Carolina, ACC is trying to play Jenga with whether or not this is appropriate in North Carolina. So that's one of those pieces that come out of the puzzle. I haven't seen anything that's absolute that says if you want to pierce the sovereign immunity statute you then have to sue in Florida. I have not seen language to that effect yet.
Gotcha. Let's take a moment here and shout out some people in the chat.
Let's go.
MN Seminoles. Is that Minnesota Seminoles, maybe? I'm not sure.
Mike
Thanks, Doug.
Norvell. Mike
Norvell Seminoles. Okay. I went a different route there.
Mhm.
We've got Doyle Smith, who is a good friend of ours, former marching chief as well. Enjoying this info. Good to see you here, Doyle. Grill Master. What do you got on the grill tonight? Always good to see Doug. You're right. The car wash. Like I don't know what's going to happen when all this stuff goes away. There will always be some other controversy we can talk about. Paul Clifton, also in the house. God bless Florida State University. Indeed. I just spent about an hour and a half with some Knowles here in Northeast Florida. And then we've got Brett Taylor. We got a couple comments from Brett. So let's see if we can decipher these. Is all the other stuff, NT, UVA, SEC, and Big, etc., making it more likely the ACC may want to settle more quickly? What do you think about this?
I think that this is a very expensive and very serious game of musical chairs. The sooner the parties can get clarity and confirmation about where their seat lands, I think they will be in a better position. There are people who will want to be serious football programs that are going to get relegated, a la the European football soccer.
Sure.
They're going to get relegated to the group of five because they're going to run out of space. They're going to run out of appetite.
Right.
I heard one show today, Big Mountain,
yes,
95 users. They said really the only attractive team out of the ACC is Florida State. They weren't even sure that Clemson could get a seat at the Big Ten or SEC table. I don't know that I agree with that, but that's an independent outside group talking about what is coming. Clemson and Miami, they are a tier below Florida State in terms of being attractive and appealing to another conference. I don't care what people think about conference realignment. It is happening. I don't care what people think about the contracts and TVs and whether the NCAA should exist or shouldn't exist. There will be a time in 2030 or 2035 where there are 64 teams or 32 teams broken up between, probably 64 teams, between the two Power 2 conferences that have lucrative contracts with the TV providers, and there's going to be everybody else. And either the Big 12 will figure out how to become attractive, either the ACC will figure out how to shore up the dam that's breaking, or those two conferences are going to be irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with you. I agree with you on that. And the thing that to keep in mind is, even though this is like a fan show, right? Sometimes you have to take the fan hat off and just look at reality.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to say, you know, Clemson and Miami are a tier below, that ruffles some feathers of those fans. And I get it. If I were a fan of one of those schools, I would feel that way too. Even though I have 5 rings, I would feel that way. But the deal is that, you know, thank the heavens, we are fans of Florida State, where that logo and the viewership and the following happens constantly, and the money is there.
I watched every down of the Willie Taggart era.
Yes.
I knew that we had an 86% chance of the ball moving backwards with every offensive snap.
Yes.
But I watched.
And I watched.
That was my team, and I wanted to see, and I wanted to be there. I wanted to see Jordan Travis, you know, and what he was going to do next. 1 out of 10 plays was going to be something pretty spectacular, but I watched. And a lot of other people clearly did as well.
Yep. And these other schools are not that way, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you can take it as slight if you want to, but you know, the TV providers, the broadcast partners, do not have affinity as far as rivals are concerned. It's just the dollar. And Florida State provides that kind of draw. So, yes, Clemson and Miami are a tier below.
The 63-3 beatdown was the largest watched, largest audience non-playoff game. People were hate watching that. People were reveling in Florida State being embarrassed, not likely. But the reality is that people watched for the wrong. They wanted to see the boot stomp on the face. And you know what? The TV people don't care why you're watching. They just care that you're watching. Are you going to see the commercials? Are you going to pay attention to the little things going underneath the TV screen when the Kia Soul drives by and does a 360? That's all that matters. They don't care if you're hate watching or you're a fan. They love the fact that everybody is tuning in.
Love it. And you can tweet at me 63-3 all you want. I don't care. Yeah. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that Florida State is in the driver's seat in terms of the future. So Brett Taylor's got another comment.
We got some great experience for Ireland. That's all I'm going to say.
That's right. Brett's got another great comment. When we get to the point where we sell the naming rights, will we be seeing games on Bobby Bowden Field at Rohan Law Stadium?
We have Spanx is well ahead of Rohan Law in terms of revenue generation. I would be happy to just be recognized by somebody as I'm walking around the Champions Club. If you're up in the Champions Club for the next game and you see me, say hi, tell me you enjoyed watching the shows. That's all I need. I don't need the stadium named after the firm.
That's fantastic, though. Doyle's got some ribs on. Good job, Doyle. Right. Got to get some ribs. If FSU wins or settles based on the Board of Trustees not signing the GOR, could that save the ACC against other teams?
I saw this today. I don't know if it was Mike Norvell Seminoles or somebody else saying this on Twitter about 10 minutes before we jumped on the broadcast on here, that the ACC should be ecstatic about that development because that might be exactly what saves the conference. The idea that, okay, Florida State, you want to get out, you're going to get out, but you're going to get out in a way that doesn't apply to a single other member in this group. They should be like, yep, you're right. Their answer should be like, you know what? You were totally right. My bad. We'll take the $120 million exit fee. You guys leave and we have everybody else has to stay. Oh my gosh. The ACC should be screaming that from the rooftops.
Thank you, FSU legal team, for finding that, is what they should be saying. Gene Watson says, awesome show. Thank you, Gene, for being here. By the way, if you are watching on YouTube, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Ryan and I, who's currently on a cruise ship, trying to get this show bumped up to 1,000 subscribers. So we're getting close. So please do it if you can. Paul Clifton also says, all we got, all we need. Yeah, we hear that all the time. Clemson slightly below FSU, but way above everybody else. I agree with you on that. Yeah. I absolutely agree with you on.
You're right, Brett. You're not wrong.
So, all right. So in terms of other legal things that have happened since the last time we talked, is there anything that's come out that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you want to jump into?
We touched on it, but what's happening is the ESPN has until February 25th to respond to FSU's brief on the motion to seal. So again, FSU came into this throwing all the papers in the air and saying, screw it. We don't care who knows everybody's dirty laundry. The ACC has tried to be very quiet. They've filed some of their documents in court under seal. What they're doing is they're providing it to the judge, providing it to opposing parties, but they're not letting it be a part of the public record. So FSU is objecting to these things being filed under seal, and the judge, very interestingly, curiously, this is not necessarily a routine ruling. He said, you know what, this is affecting ESPN. We want ESPN to give us a brief explaining why they feel we should or shouldn't grant this motion, this request to seal the document. So ESPN has gone out and hired Cravath, a very popular and powerful nationwide law firm that deals with a lot of business transactions. And they're going to file a brief either in support of FSU or in support of the ACC. Now, what's curious here is that if you go to the ACC filings that included the ESPN documents, the ESPN contracts say, in any event that this contract is being litigated by one of its members in the ACC, the laws of the state where the member resides shall be enforced. So here the issue is privacy, secrecy. Florida State has very broad sunshine laws. And so when it comes to determining whether or not these documents should be made public, if the ESPN contract is saying Florida law should apply, then that should translate into the judge denying the request to keep this information private. Now, ESPN has a chance to put its 2 cents in, and it will be very interesting. Does the ESPN brief side with the ACC? Do they say, yes, we agree that this is privileged information, that this is proprietary information, we don't want this information out, the ACC is correct, throwing the ACC a lifeline? Or do they stick with the plain language and the contract that says, no, Florida State's right. If Florida State wants to see it, if Florida State sunshine laws are being applied, then we have no objection. We have no other legal reason for this to be maintained private. This should be a matter of the public domain. That's going to be very interesting.
That is interesting. And just because of ESPN and Disney and Florida, I can imagine that ESPN, this is just me, I can imagine ESPN saying the contract states what it states.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the state law, determines that this stuff has to be public, then it's just public. We're not going to fight that at all. It just is what it is. I can imagine that's probably, I don't think they would want to rile any more feathers up with that kind of stuff. So I'd be surprised if they did.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Anything else legal wise?
I have not gotten into the Dartmouth litigation. I have not gotten into the NCAA stuff. I will just give you a high level opinion that we are moving towards every Division I athlete being compensated, that every Division I athlete is an employee of not necessarily the university, but an entity related to the academic institution. And if the ESPN or if the NCAA doesn't settle their litigation that's currently in the Supreme Court, they run a substantial risk of going bankrupt based on all of their back-owed income benefits that do also matriculate down to the member institutions, which is why we're dealing with the private equity and securing that. So I'm not prepared to talk about that today. I don't want to get into it.
No.
But if this ACC stuff goes away very quickly and that's all I'm left with to talk about, then I will make myself an expert on those issues as well. And we'll come back on next month and talk about that.
So not to get too deep in it, but just want to make sure I'm clear. If the NCAA is held responsible and having to back pay employees, the NCAA doesn't have the money. But keep in mind, the NCAA is the member institutions. So that responsibility would fall on the universities. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that, because I have read that before and I wanted to make sure that was an accurate way to portray that.
Florida State could get a bill for $280 million to be paid to the plaintiffs on this litigation.
Right.
For Sam Cowart as a linebacker in 1994 needing to be compensated. I don't know how far back they're planning on going. Maybe maybe this will be one of those times where it's really in FSU's favor that they just recently started college football compared to Michigan and Ohio State. But yes, every member institution is going to get an invoice for the millions of dollars that they owe if the litigation proceeds, if the NCAA doesn't come up with some reasonable settlement that the member institutions also still have to pay into.
Again, not to get too deep, but I saw, or I read or listened to a podcast, can't remember how I found it, but about how, you're a student athlete or you're an employee, but there might be some kind of middle designation, right? That doesn't really exist, right? But they would come up with it. Have you heard about that as well?
Yeah. Look, one of my favorite things about the law is the creation. You can look at the Hubble telescope. You can look at the James Webb telescope and peer into the distance of where galaxies and stars are forming. That happens in the law. New things are created within the law. There is the possibility that this hybrid entity, this hybrid identification is going to exist. Yeah. You are a student athlete. We still expect you to matriculate, but while doing so, you have inherent value to the university and you should be compensated based on that inherent value. I think that is the most likely scenario to come out of this, is that first the athletic departments and universities will create a new entity that is responsible for compensation. It's responsible for negotiating salary caps. I think salary caps are likely. Absolutely. And then within that, there's this new type of person that is not a student, that's not an employee, but is something in between.
Something in the middle. Yep. Well, yeah, it's what I've read as well. All right, so let's get out of the legal realm.
Let's go.
The legal discussion is completed at this point, unless something else comes up in the comments.
Coaches Club.
Let's talk about the Coaches Club, because you have that information and I do as well. So, I'm gonna, even though it's close to my heart, I'm gonna let you deliver it.
No. This is your show.
No. I want you to deliver it. I want you to deliver it, because I'm just gonna sit back and enjoy, because it's gonna make my heart fill up. So
within the Boosters organization right now, you have the ability to donate to something near and dear to your heart. If volleyball, if sand volleyball is your passion, you can sign up for the Coaches Club and you can donate specifically to sand volleyball, and 100% of your donations
earmark it right to
go
them.
Specifically to sand volleyball. And this exists across. There are two reasons. Look, let me take a step back, give you some context. COVID hurts my heart, not because of the death, and I'm not diminishing what COVID did to our society, what COVID did to families, and how many lives COVID claimed. But once you get past that codicil, COVID took two things from me that I will never forgive it for. I had floor seats in Atlanta for the Final Four because FSU was going to be national champions of the basketball season that year.
Without a doubt.
And the Friday night before the Final Four, I was booked to be on a plane with the baseball team to fly to Boston College for their series. I am a big fan of FSU baseball. If I could only do FSU baseball or FSU football, I would pick 11 and meet and the FSU baseball team and the Animals of Section B, because that's where my true love lies. So I'm a member and a participant of the Coaches Club for the baseball team. There is a new Coaches Club that is being formed, and that is going to be to specifically earmark and support David Plack, Dr. Dunnigan, and the Marching Chiefs. They are going to be added to the Coaches Club ensemble for the fall. So you can join the Coaches Club for Marching Chiefs and ensure that they get to go to every game.
So this is not anything. I'm not saying like this was my idea at all, because this
it's your fault.
it's very much an obvious thing that should have happened. But several years ago, when Ryan and I started talking about, the Chiefs as part of the show, it was a simple step. There are coaches clubs, and you can earmark. And we have given money to the women's basketball team because that's been near and dear to us, right? The Chiefs are, while it's not an athletic team, they are part and parcel to the athletic experience. And so to
100%.
have a coaches club specifically earmarked for the Chiefs for travel.
Makes me cry. I tear up a little bit.
If you think about it, it's almost like the most simple step you can take, and we are finally doing it. It's probably not available yet. I don't think it's available yet, but within the next few months, I believe, as you go to donate to Florida State, you can donate to as a booster. You can earmark your money for the general fund, of course, which I do that. And then, but you can also pick coaches clubs to donate specific money to. The Chiefs are going to be there. They're going to be one of them, which, like I said, my heart fills up as I hear you talk about it. And so at this event,
I'm glad Ryan wasn't here tonight. I'm glad I got to be on just for that.
You got to be the one to break it. I was speaking with some people at the booster thing tonight, and this came up, and it's just, we can say, well, it should have been happening all along. I'm not even going to take that tack. I'm just happy. I'm just happy it's there. Now, we as supporters need to do what's in our heart and go and do whatever we can possibly do that our pocketbooks allow, and try to get the Chiefs to as many things as possible. One thing I tried to get out of the booster representative that was there is how many people were actually being tagged to go to Ireland. But he was not sure at that point, which I have a little bit of information on, but I don't want to deliver that until it's absolutely concrete. But I think it's important that we, as a fandom, and not just Chiefs fans, Florida State fans, know how many people the Chiefs are going to be allowed to send, because the sooner we know that, the sooner we can start raising more money for more people to go. So that's my take on that.
This is a great opportunity for me to throw in about my work in Georgia and representing catastrophically injured people, whether work accident, car accident. At Rohan Law, we will donate 10% of any NOL referrals back to the university. Please, if you know somebody in Georgia that has been injured, if you know somebody in Georgia that is catastrophically debilitated based on somebody's negligence, have them call me, and I promise you 10% of all NOL referrals to our office will go back to the Chiefs, will go back to the boosters, will go back to Rising Spear, will go back to the Battle's End. We love support that. When I have on my vision board of why I want to be successful in my business, it's because I want to provide for my family and I want to provide for Florida State.
Yeah, I love it. Another reason why this fandom is second to none. And as much as we can utilize utilize the services of NOL-owned businesses, people need to do it. They have your back, and they have a common love. And in situations like you just mentioned, they're gonna take some of what the good Lord has blessed them with and bless it back to people that are putting in the work. Like, for example, this comment here from, I'll just as a doting dad.
Name. I know that last
doting
name.
Dad. This is my daughter, who is a marching chief, and we've had countless conversations about back in the day, Doug, when you were in Chiefs, when I was in Chiefs, we were going to more of these things.
Yeah, I remember the buses being stuck in the mud at Duke. Yes,
and unfortunately, the Chiefs of today don't have that. Are not currently having that same kind of memory being built. But that's what this coaches club hopefully and anybody giving back to the Chiefs is going to be able to do. And that's her, by the way, with a marching chief hat on when she was probably 2 years.
Awesome. Quick memory story. I want an aside here. I'm going to hijack the show. So you and I went to Duke, and the mud was so deep that Chiefs were actually losing their shoes
in the mud,
and they weren't coming back. I went back to Duke probably about 10 years after that. It's probably 2007, 2008. And I went with some of our Chief friends and buddies, and we were sitting there in the stands before the game started. And there was a FSU guy and his son sitting right in front of us. And he pointed to one of the end zones in that stadium that at that time sat about 20,000 people. And past the track that ran around the stadium, there was the academic All-Americans. And the dad looked into the son's eyes and was like, "You see that sign over there? Do you know what that sign means?" And I was all excited for this heartfelt moment between a father and son. He's like, "That sign means 0 and 11. That's why they're no good." And it just, that's a moment that's seared into my brain, a memory that I have now. Duke has obviously come around as a football school. Obviously, they put a whole lot more interest in it. Riley Leonard did a great job until he decided to go to Notre Dame. But there was a time back in those 90s and 2000s where Duke was not taking football particularly seriously.
I will, and I know we have some other topics to get into, but I'll have a couple stories as well. So that same game, as you recall, at that point, I think Derek Brooks was actually scoring more points than any of our opponents leading into that game.
Yes.
But also at the conclusion of that game, we traded marching band shorts with the Duke band, and the Duke band shirts said DUMB, dumb, for the Duke University marching band. So, and I had one of those shirts for a long time. Another story I have about Duke is when I was a band director in North Carolina, I had Duke University has a band day, where they invite high school bands in, and just like Florida State has a band day. And I decided that and their band day was against Florida State. So we brought the marching band. We raised money and brought the marching band to Duke for that game. And I had taught the band the war chant and some other Florida State songs. And while the game is going on, there's this small marching band from Charlotte, North Carolina, playing the war chant, playing a couple other things that caused a lot of anger. Because during halftime, when the high school bands came out, the Duke bands were throwing stuff at our band members.
Oh my god!
Because they were playing Florida State stuff. But anyway,
and you were not invited back.
I was not invited back. But I did get a fantastic letter, like handwritten letter from one of the boosters that was actually there and gifted my wife and I some tickets to another game. It was really nice.
Nice.
But anyway, let's talk about Kirk Herbstreit, Doug. Let's talk about Kirk.
If you'll give me a second, I'm gonna lose you from the camera because I'm gonna go take a brief field trip.
Yes, do. While you're taking that field trip, let's just say that I don't know who is running Kirk's social media, but are these clown noses?
I have 30 clown noses for my favorite 30 people that I'm going to see in Ireland. I plan on absolutely printing out a schedule of cheers and chants, and I will be disappointed if I'm not escorted off the grounds by the second commercial break.
Amen, brother. Shannon and I will be there. So if you can reserve 2 clown noses for us, that would be fantastic. I don't know how this stuff comes about, because sometimes stuff starts to happen on X and you're like, you don't know where it all started, but you end up seeing the end result. And the end result shows up as Kirk deciding to just engage again.
Why?
It doesn't, I mean,
because he has an unclean conscience.
For the engagement, maybe. because you know he's going to get engagement from our fan base.
So one of my favorite things that I read on Twitter today was from Paul Feinbaum. And it was that, look, when the first complaints came out about Kirk Herbstreit and the college football playoff and their position, I heard from him within minutes. I heard Paul Feinbaum heard, the defense of the issue from Kirk within minutes by text message. Well, this Dylan Raiola story comes out.
Oh, yeah, that's the next thing, right?
And Feinbaum has not gotten a text from Kirk Herbstreit regarding any possible defense that may have occurred. So the good thing now is it's not just Florida State, but there's going to be some Georgia fans that are going to be very interested in making sure that Kirk hears the message loud and clear when we get to Dublin.
I just cannot, you cannot pretend to be an objective journalist or objective reporter and do the things that he's done. Mm-hmm. Whether it's for the snub or the things that he said leading up to the snub, or now with this new thing about calling a recruit's dad and egging him on to switch his commitment from Georgia to Nebraska. So if you're in the chat and you didn't know that actually happened, mm-hmm. where Kirk Herbstreit called Dylan Raiola's dad and had gotten wind that Dylan was thinking about switching his commitment from Georgia to Nebraska, and basically was trying to make that happen.
No longer
what are we doing, Doug?
Objective journalist. He's an activist. He's not a journalist. He's an activist.
And unfortunately, he's got clout. And there are a lot of people out there, until he's the one doing damage to your school, you will see him as you see him.
He was a great guy. It was my favorite guy on College Game Day, right up until he suggested that a one-loss Alabama and a one-loss Texas should be in over a Jordan Travis-led Florida State undefeated team.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I don't know. I mean, there's not much more you can say about it, right?
Well, what you can say is you can augment that with Nick Saban joining the ESPN Game Day crew next year.
Yes, it's all interbreeding.
Look, there are coincidences, like, the sun happens to rotate once a year around the earth, or the earth rotates around the sun. But Nick Saban joining the ESPN Game Day crew after being in the college football playoffs and retiring, those are not coincidences.
They are not. If the tinfoil hat fits, you probably should wear it. Mm-hmm. You cannot convince me, being a Florida State fan aside, seeing all the things that have occurred, you cannot convince me with that line of things that occurred were not discussed, maybe not, hammered out in an outline, but mm-hmm. discussed and figured out, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to do.
In the event that there is anyone listening to this program that's under age 25, I want you to understand and know that the world works based on who you know. Who are your connections? Absolutely. Who are you friends with? Most jobs, most business transactions, everything revolves around who you know. And unfortunately, the more powerful you get, the more accurate that becomes. And look,
if
Nick Saban happens to know a lot of people.
He does. If you happen to have no inside info and no contacts in your life, you are going to have a problem. You are going to have a problem. You have to know somebody.
Let's
right?
revisit that slogan up there. And
yeah. Paul Clifton, they need to give everyone at the game in Ireland a clown nose. Absolutely. We will work that out. And here you go. I'm going to crochet some clown noses this time. So we're going to have some handmade clown noses. And I think that those clown noses will probably be handed out to those within the Marching Chiefs, probably. But so I'm looking forward to some crocheted clown noses as well. So, if you're on X feel free to jump in the water. The water's fine. Kirk at some point in the next week or so is going to tweet something else. And it'll be like a Florida State reunion in his mentions. So that'll be fun. And then
if you
Nick
haven't been
Saban
blocked
thing.
by him already.
If you haven't been blocked by him. And I may have now that I actually added him on this show. And then the Nick Saban thing. It's, again, it is what it is. So I used to love College Game Day, Doug.
Yeah. Oh,
I used to love it.
Yeah. I would get up at 8 a.m. My wife hates getting up early. We would be on the road at 8 a.m. because you would have to get to your tailgate spot from Atlanta to Tallahassee in time to take your satellite dish and point it at the satellite to get the 11 a.m. college. That was the goal. Leave at 8 to be there by 11 a.m. to join College Game Day. Two things happened. First, they moved up the start time. I don't need to hear all of the sob stories about the cancer patients from Division II schools. Please stop. Give me a reason to watch the other games. And two, they started, what was the second point? Earlier and...
Well, I mean, I can give you old band.
No. The song, every year, the song changed. The song, and I got so excited for that first game of the season because what's the new song? And then they got to this song that they've had for 27 years, and it's the worst song that they've had in the last 30 years.
It's laziness, Doug.
Yeah. So between not changing the song because that was a thing and starting at 10 a.m., 9 a.m., what did they start? 9 a.m.
It's 9 now, maybe.
It's ridiculous.
Because it's built by the Home Depot, and we got to go through all the nonsense. And I also have to listen to that ridiculous person they have on the panel now, which
Fox News or Fox Sports Sunday noon, big noon game.
Big noon.
Give it to me. Give it to me.
And of course, now the beloved Lee Corso is, the last bastion of why I wanted to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have no desire.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm spent, brother.
They're going to see their ratings drop. Their ratings are going to drop this year.
So this has been fun. Doug, again, I got to tell you, thank you so much for co-hosting tonight.
Of course. My pleasure.
We hit a lot of stuff tonight, and I'm going to keep, pushing this out so people go back and watch it. Garnet and Old, no inside info, no contacts, no problem. We do have some contacts. And we're on every Thursday at 7. Doug, why don't you let people know how to find you?
So I'm on Twitter and X at Rohan Law PC, very active in both the FSU space and the legal space. Look, I love educating my clients here in Georgia. I don't practice in Florida, and that was one of the reasons why for several years we really didn't do this type of stuff, because I know that my allegiance with Florida State leads to a lot of Florida contacts. But everybody knows somebody in Georgia. Everybody travels through Georgia. Everybody is involved in a speed trap in southern Georgia as they're driving to the Georgia Tech game. So make sure your friends and family know about Rohan Law. Follow us. I don't want you to need my services. We want to be your best friends on your worst day. So that means if you're calling our office, the shit has hit the fan, you don't like what is going on, I apologize for an R-rated word. Things are going bad if you need my services. But if you are going through some bad stuff and you want a Knoll to come alongside you and help you through the process, I've had my own firm for the last 10 years. We help you with work accidents, car accidents, and any type of criminal offense. And I just want to make sure that you know, based on our Google reviews, we do care. We have great systems in place in our office, and anybody that you send me is going to be somebody that's taken care of. And especially if they're catastrophically injured in the state of Georgia, we're going to give 10% of what we get back to any Seminole Booster, Rising Spear, Battle's End, Coaches Club organization. So let me know if you need our services. It's a free consultation. You don't pay for our services. Everything we get is on the back end from the insurance company. So just make sure that you follow us and keep us in mind. if you have any friends in Georgia that need an attorney.
Listen, you got to follow him. Just the fact that he's a Knoll, that's the first thing. And then in the event you do need something and you live in Georgia, you know you got somebody you can trust with that. It's gonna walk you through it all. Also, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on X. Big Papa East, again, on a cruise ship. You can follow him. Follow me as well at BC Knoll. Got to get through all this stuff. Screw ESPN. I'm done with them. Now, if they come back and say, hey, we're okay with all these documents being public, then maybe I'll have a little bit getting back into my heart a little bit. And of course, send Chiefs all the damn time, and we're getting closer. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Doug. And look for us next week, Thursday at 7 p.m. This has been Garnet and Old. Go Knowles.